we want to test the assumptions that we've made, that the technical security controls that we have, the tools, the monitoring, the detections, all the rules that we have in place, that all of those things will actually work. And if we stop the test at just that first step of the people, then we're really not thoroughly testing the organization. And when we actually do have a social engineering attack, there may be some assumptions that we've made that our tools will work, that these security controls will work, and they fail, and we are compromised, and we aren't fully testing those things.
Welcome to the Phillip Wiley Show. Take a look behind the curtain of professional hacking and hear compelling discussions with guests from diverse backgrounds who share a common curiosity and passion for challenges and their job. And now, here's your host, offensive security professional, educator, mentor, and author, Phillip Wiley.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Phillip Wiley Show. Today I'm happy to be joined by my friend Alethe Denis. So Alethe and I go back before pre-pandemic. We were connected on social media, but correct me if I'm wrong. I'm trying to remember, did we meet for the first time? Was it at DerbyCon in 2019 there in the Social Engineering Village, or was it before that?
I think it might have been DEF CON before Derby,
Okay.
But I could be wrong because we've been connected on social media for quite a long time before that.
Yeah, because one of the things I remember about DerbyCon was you were up there on the panel and you were holding your newborn baby up there. So your baby was pretty young at the time. So that's one of the things I remember about the panel.
Yeah, that baby is going into first grade.
Wow.
So it's been quite a while. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how fast kids grow up. I mean, it's just like my daughter. Doesn't seem that long ago since she was a baby, but she'll be 34 in December.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Yeah. No, it is genuinely insane how fast life starts to go once you start having a family.
Yeah, and it just seems when you get busy, it seems like things just go faster for some reason.
Mm-hmm. Couldn't agree more.
So I always ask my guests at the beginning of the episode to share their hacker origin story, and you've got a really cool one, so can't wait for you to share yours. So if you wouldn't mind sharing your hacker origin story.
Yeah, of course. So I would say I probably started out on the social engineering side, not really knowing the term social engineering, but as a kid, I found myself being a bit sneaky and a bit of a manipulator. And then I became interested in hacking and computer science programming probably in high school, and especially after I saw the movie Hackers in and around 1995. But I decided to take a computer science class in high school, which was relatively new to my school, which was an all-girls Catholic school. We were probably the first year of girls to take a computer science class and not just a typing class. And that was because I was playing a game called Lord, and it was a text-based role-playing game where you were a character moving through an imaginary fantasy land and confronted with different obstacles and challenges and things. And I wanted to learn how to code because I thought that it would give me a good opportunity to hack similar types of games and learn how they worked. And so I started off there in high school with coding and in a language called Turbo Pascal, which I know most people won't even recognize as a language. This was so long ago. And then I went to college and I majored in chemical and molecular biology with a minor in computer science. And then life took a pretty sharp detour. And then I only found my way back into the world of hacking a couple decades later, almost, when I was the co-owner of an IT MSP and interested in security and privacy for our IT clients. And my husband and I went to DEF CON one summer with one of our engineers, and he was amazing enough to introduce us to each one of the villages at DEF CON. And when I stumbled into the social engineering village, I was like completely enthralled with the contest that focused on voice phishing over the phone and the fact that they would give a contestant a company to voice phish using the phone, throw them in a soundproof booth, and then have them make calls to elicit information from employees that had no idea that they were a part of this contest at the world's largest hacking conference, and that somebody was sitting on a stage in a soundproof booth making calls with an audience of hundreds or thousands of people watching while this person tried to find out, what kind of computer they were using or what kind of operating system or software was on the computer. It just was completely and thoroughly fascinating to me. So after watching that contest for a couple of years, I decided I wanted to compete in the contest. And thankfully, in that social engineering village, I was selected to compete along with 13 other contestants. And the first year I competed, I ended up finishing in 6th place. And the second year that I competed, I ended up winning that competition. And every year, DEF CON looks at all the competitions that occur at DEF CON, and they decide which ones are worthy of what they call a black badge. And that black badge essentially gives the recipient access to the conference for free for the rest of their life, which is pretty incredible. But you also get a physical black badge that's kind of neat as like a trophy. And like ultimate bragging rights. So the social engineering contest, the Capture the Flag contest that year, was selected for a black badge, and I was awarded that on stage with that 3-month-old baby that I took to the conference that year. And so she and I got to receive the black badge on stage with Jeff Moss and Grifter and everybody up there. And it was just a completely, thoroughly overwhelming, amazing experience. And at that point, I decided that I wanted to go back into my original idea from when I was in high school, that I wanted to focus on hacking as a career and not just a hobby. And that's sort of the cliff notes on how I got here.
Very cool. One of the inspirations that behind the hacker origin story of this show is one of the things I like, us having a common comic books and the Marvel movies and stuff, is that I like a good origin story. So I think like superheroes, cybersecurity professionals are real life heroes, and they all have an origin story to share. So thanks for sharing yours.
Yeah, of course. Pleasure.
So interesting. The cool thing about what you're doing when you think about hacking, you think about humans, sometimes people that don't work in this industry don't really connect the dots. But when you really think about it, this was like some of the first type of hacking that ever existed before there was technology to hack.
I could not agree more. I think people have been scamming, tricking, and conning each other since the dawn of time. And I think that necessity came out of the scarcity and limited resources that were a problem for most people from the very beginning. So if there were limits on food or availability of clean water, people had to get creative for how to either protect what they had or gain what they had from other people who had it. And that's kind of where I think these creative methods for conning, scamming, and thieving came out of, were essentially people just trying to survive. And over time, those have evolved to kind of suit the modern world.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So in your role, you're also on the red team. So what all do you do along with social engineering?
Right. So at Bishop Fox, I am on the red team. And so essentially my role is to help further the agenda of the red team in the vein of social engineering. So if the objective of the red team is to gain access to a specific room in a building and implant a physical device on the network, then my goal is to use social engineering, develop a pretext, figure out how to achieve gaining access to that area and to get in and out of the building without being detected, with no one noticing, hopefully, and to allow either myself or my teammates to achieve that access, manage to implant that device, and then slip out of the building without being stopped or without anyone knowing. And so what I usually do is perform the reconnaissance, perform the pretext development, and then help to craft the strategy and the tactics that we're going to use to execute that campaign so that we can achieve the trophy and then get to the goal of the engagement. Because unlike pen testing, where we're trying to find all the vulnerabilities or all the gaps in the security for a particular client in whatever application or system that they want us to test, with red teaming, typically we're setting 1 or 2 objectives or trophies or goals for that engagement. And then we can use whatever method is the most efficient and the path of least resistance, essentially, to get there. And typically that is through the people.
So it's kind of interesting because I think based on my experience and observations, it seems like companies have, I don't know, maybe it seems like they're not taking the social engineering and red teaming pieces as seriously as they need to, because you see a lot of these companies that are using these canned phishing email softwares, which is good for security awareness, but they're not using payloads and they're just testing clicks, which doesn't really show the value of an actual phishing engagement. Can you kind of share what the values of a true phishing engagement over these canned emails where they're just testing mouse clicks?
Right. I think that the type of phishing where you're testing engagement with a phishing lure, so that link that's in a phishing email, and where you're sending that email to everyone in the organization, and it's that broad campaign that hits everybody, but it doesn't go past that initial interaction with the person. So you're just testing everything before, like post exploitation activities. Does a person click on the link? That is only really capturing a very small percentage of the bigger picture. And so if I can get a person to click a link and go to my credential phishing or credential harvesting website, that really only tells me maybe 25 or 50% of the overall security posture of the organization, or that organization's ability to defend against a social engineering attack. Because what really ends up stopping us most often is what happens after that. Does the person get to the credential harvesting site and go, this looks very suspicious, I'm actually not going to put my credentials into this website? Or do they put the credentials in, and then is there multi-factor authentication or universal second factor authentication or something else technical control wise that will prevent an attacker who has credentials from accessing that user's account? And that is what's going to give you the bigger picture of how safe that organization actually is when it comes to a social engineering attack. So if we're just testing mouse clicks, of course we're going to get people to click on those. But if we really want to know how safe an organization is, we need to know what happens after that. Will the payload actually detonate? Will the person actually put their credentials in? And if they do, will the technical controls that we have in place actually work? Because at the end of the day, we're not just testing the people. We want to test the assumptions that we've made, that the technical security controls that we have, the tools, the monitoring, the detections, all the rules that we have in place, that all of those things will actually work. And if we stop the test at just that first step of the people, then we're really not thoroughly testing the organization. And when we actually do have a social engineering attack, there may be some assumptions that we've made that our tools will work, that these security controls will work, and they fail, and we are compromised, and we aren't fully testing those things, so we won't be aware and we will be compromised. So in an environment where it's very important for us to protect things like our IP and our money and our people and our data and our clients, and we don't want to have a large breach, things like a red team assessment are vital. They're very vital because they give an opportunity for the security team to test all of those things, to test the assumptions, and to make sure that all the tooling will work, all the technical security controls will work. And when the people fail, not if, but when the person, because there's always one, does fail, that those technical controls will prevent the ultimate failure and, compromise of the organization.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting that, well, it's kind of sad. Hopefully people start learning and catching on that you need to do things like the social engineering campaigns, phishing, as well as physical pen testing, because, you can have some of the most secure endpoints, but if someone's able to get their hands on a keyboard of a system that's been logged in, then that threat actor can do whatever they want to. They don't have to be some elite hacker to be able to gain access. So as far as, physical pen testing goes, what types of tests or physical locations and things do you test during your physical pen tests?
It kind of depends on the client priorities. We've tested things like clean rooms to see if we can get into areas within facilities that nobody should be getting into because there's very sensitive equipment, sensitive products, and things that our clients don't want anyone to access besides those who are absolutely authorized to be in those spaces, things that could be destroyed if somebody that is not properly, suited up, if they get access to those spaces, they could cause significant damage. So we've tested everything from super clean, like scientific environments, all the way to just your standard office park, multi-tenant building, rows and rows of cubicles type building where they just would like to see if we can navigate through an office and access an electrical or server closet and see if we can get into those spaces to see if the security awareness training is working. Are people feeling like they are empowered to stop somebody in their office space and challenge whether they are supposed to be there or not? And for the most part, what we found is people, generally speaking, are not confident, or they don't feel empowered enough to stop somebody that's in their space.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to see some of the tests and some of the different costumes or badges and different things that social engineers create to be able to get in these environments. I've seen people that will go out and go online to some of these stores and buy like employee merchandise, like a polo shirt or something, to be able to pose as someone within the organization. We had someone local in our community, a social engineer, that she had a prosthetic pregnant belly. So she would go into locations with a handful of Starbucks coffee, and who's not going to help a pregnant woman trying to get into the building? And so that was a really good way for her to gain access. So what is some of the more unique ways or things you've used to gain access to buildings?
Yeah, so I've heard about the pregnant belly thing, and I maintain that typically a pregnant person can go anywhere. Usually you will not get stopped, especially if it's like a hospital environment. You can maintain that you're just trying to progress labor or something like that, and they'll typically allow you to walk anywhere, which is pretty dangerous from a security standpoint. For the most part, I try to stick to pretexts that I can explain as being more procedural or benign, because I try to stay away from things that our clients or employees of our clients could explain away as being borderline unethical or out of scope or outside of the rules of the engagement, because I'd like to prove that I can do it kind of like on hard mode rather than taking a shortcut or doing something that people go, well, like, of course that worked. Mainly because I want it to align best with what our clients' goals are for the project. So ultimately, what we're trying to do is we're trying to test whether or not the humans at the client company are going to follow procedure for verifying access to the space. And so we will dress up as an IT vendor. We will dress up as, different types of individuals like property managers or people that are being brought in as vendors for the city to do like an occupancy audit or assessment for the building and, things like that. Nothing super salacious or wild. Sometimes it'll be somebody from the ISP or somebody from, the power company. The typical HVAC, like, technician doesn't really work for me specifically, but I know some members of my team have done like fire inspector type things and HVAC technician or other types of technician type pretexts to get access into buildings. I haven't done anything super crazy, but I do use like wigs and other methods of changing my appearance throughout the week so that I can do hostile surveillance around the building and then look different from the day that I tried to make infiltration into the building under the pretext. And usually I'll wear the wigs while I do surveillance, so I don't have to wear a wig when I try to go into the building, because they are not comfortable, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. And I like the point you bring up about being ethical about it, because I mean, there are some cases that probably some things that you can do that you could probably get in just about anywhere. And it's kind of good that y'all are being ethical about it and finding cases that are more common, because those are the ones you really want to test, because there's some things that you could do that you could probably get in just about most places.
Yeah. I've also had clients that were we were testing retail store locations. So I've used like my own kids as props when doing like surveillance. So I'll be like, hey, you're coming with me into this store, and they'll just be kids in the space and then kind of be distractions. And that kind of lets me take pictures of things and like collect information where security cameras are, where the exits are, where this is, and kind of like map out a floor plan of what the interior of the store looks like without looking super suspicious, because I can be like, hey, let's take a picture of you here to the kid, and like nobody cares.
That's a really good idea. And, most cases people aren't going to expect anything crazy when you
Right.
got kids with you. So
Right.
that's a good method to use there. So thinking along the lines of that, so I've seen some of the videos of these like things at the different social engineering villages and stuff, and people are trying to do stuff to make it seem more realistic. So whenever you're doing any kind of phishing and you're calling from an office or anything, you use any kind of background noises and sounds to make it sound more legit.
I find background noise distracting. To me, I'm just too ADHD to function. But also, people have really great noise canceling headphones and like headsets now. And so I don't typically manufacture background noise, but I also do work in an office environment kind of naturally, or I can sometimes be like working from home. And so if things pop up in the background, like I don't try to suppress those, or if I think it can add to the authenticity of the call, then I'll try to like work it in to it. I do have like a fully customized PBX that I use for voice phishing. And so that kind of helps because I can spoof numbers and do things like that. But it also is kind of limiting in that I have like a really great headset, so it cancels out all the background noise. Even the type of voice over IP phone that I use, like desk phone, has really great noise canceling. So even if I try to like bring background noise into the situation, sometimes I don't even know if it actually gets through on the line. So like I'll just like try to type real hard, like hold on a sec while I put that into my computer while I'm trying to like buy time. But yeah, sometimes you just got to get really comfortable with awkward silences. And that can be helpful too, because sometimes your person that you're talking to will try to fill that. And then you can have them leak some information to you during the course of the conversation.
So since you've been doing this for a while, has the pretext and scenarios gotten more difficult over time?
I think people are certainly more security conscious and more aware of voice phishing and email phishing specifically. Um, I've even gotten to the point where if I choose to do email phishing, which is rare because typically unless they've specifically asked us to do email phishing, I try to avoid it because email filtering is so fantastic. It's almost impossible to email a payload to anyone these days without it getting immediately yanked out of their inboxes, if it even makes it that far. And then as far as like sending a link to a malicious place to anyone, that's also something that just isn't super realistic these days. So you have to get pretty creative. So I try to avoid email phishing. But if I do have to do it, then we've figured out some crafty ways to do it. And then typically I couple that with a phone call. And so usually what happens is I'll send them the thing. And if they don't immediately do it, then I will make a phone call. Then when they pick up the phone, I'll be like, oh, hey, this is, Sarah in HR. I just sent you a thing. Did you get it? And they'll be like, oh, yeah, that looked like a phishing email. And I was like, oh, that's so funny. No, it's totally legitimate. And we're just using this service because it makes it super easy for us to like put everything in a spreadsheet afterward. And they're like, oh, that's crazy. Yeah, I'll totally get that done for you. And I just make them feel super at ease about it. Yes, I know I'm a horrible person. And then they're like, yeah, I'll get it done by the end of the day. And then they'll go either do it while I'm on the phone with them because I'll just like make friends and keep talking to them, and they'll like, well, I'll just do it right now while I've got you on the phone. And I'm like, great. And then we like walk through it and I kind of put them at ease if they ever get to a point where they're like, well, this looks weird. Like, why did this thing just pop up on my screen? And then I try to like make it so that they don't feel the need to report anything to like security or anything. But a lot of times they'll be like, well, yeah, I already reported that as a phishing email. And I'm like, oh, darn it. So there are a lot of people that are very security aware. And so I feel like security awareness training is working. It is working. And there is a much larger percentage of the population of employees that we test now that are aware, that do recognize the common signs. And we have a lot of great tools in our mail clients that point these things out too, and they make it easy for people to report them. And once you've got a large number of reporting, and then you've got similar, subject lines and things like that, typically, your systems can pull those things out of other people's inboxes and stop these things pretty quickly. So yeah, I think that we do get blocked a lot more frequently now than we did, 5, 6, 10 years ago. When you went to watch contestants make these calls in Social Engineering Village, back in 2015, 2016, it was just a bloodbath. And I think now it's a lot more difficult to get people to pick up the phone, like just to pick the phone up. And then people are a lot more skeptical when you start to ask questions now than they used to be. Even when we're deep faking, I mean, we've been tasked with doing deep fakes, and we have made some very compelling deep fakes. And still, I'll get extremely skeptical people, even in accounting, HR, and functions of the business that people think are not as technical or not as security aware. And they'll be like, who's this? What did you say? And they'll start to grill me. And I'm talking, but they're hearing like a male CEO of their company asking them if they can perform like a wire transfer. And they're just like, no, I don't think I can do that over the phone. Can you send me an email about that, please? And I'm like, good for you.
That's good to see people catching on. And I don't know, just basically you think of how often I was talking to my wife earlier today because I've been getting this call from this robocall that is trying to sell burial policies, and it happens all the time. And you could tell it's a robocall because she'll say, "This is Cynthia Davis. You asked me to call you back. Do you remember?"
Yeah.
And just goes on, and there's so much scams go on nowadays. It just seems like people kind of get conditioned against phishing calls because there's so much scams going on.
I think, yeah, it's trending now more towards people being less inclined to be helpful by default, because I think that's how we were sort of trained growing up, is to be courteous and helpful by default on the phone. And now people are just more like deny by default and like skeptical by default when it comes to the phone if they pick it up. Like, I think I'm at the point where I just don't answer the phone anymore.
Yeah.
And honestly, my voicemail, like my outbound voicemail, doesn't even have my name in it. And I say, I don't answer numbers that I don't recognize. So leave me a message. And if you don't leave me a compelling enough message, don't expect a call back.
Yeah, I don't blame you. It's like I was telling my wife today, because I'd got this call. It's stopped for a while, then it's coming back again. And sometimes I'm lucky enough to say this is possible spam.
Yeah.
Or sometimes I don't get a warning and I answer the phone, and it's annoying because it's this robocall. It's the same person's voice every time. I was telling my wife, it's like hardly you get calls anymore that are legit calls. It's usually someone trying to sell you something or trying to scam you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, one of the scariest ones I experienced was actually had someone call that was posing as someone from the sheriff's department. I actually had jury duty coming up, and I'd actually went and had to push my jury duty date out later. So the timing of them calling really had me convinced for a while. Thankfully for my wife was able to figure that out, because they were wanting me to come to the sheriff's department at the county courthouse, which seemed really legitimate. I'm in Texas, so the guy had this real heavy Texas accent that sounded like a sheriff.
Yeah.
And they were, trying to get me to come to, and actually the address they gave me was a legit address of the courthouse. But it's so crazy that how good this stuff's getting. And you can just imagine people that aren't trained on security, don't have that background, how much a victim they can be to these type of attacks.
Absolutely. I know people who are, working on masters in psychology, and they've still fallen victim to these types of aggressive over the phone manipulation scams related to like banking, because they will spoof the number of the banking call center, so it comes up looking like customer service for the bank. And then they say, like, somebody tried to get money out of your bank account at a branch. We've got them on surveillance camera. You need to come down to the branch right away and prove that you are who you say you are. Stay on the line with us. Drive to the bank. Go withdraw money from your account to prove that you're you. And then they like they use all these like really heavy manipulation tactics, but they keep you on the phone and they badger you so that you don't talk to anybody else. And then you don't like reveal what's going on to like the bank teller or anything else that's going on to anyone else. And if you try to hang up on them, they will call you back in such rapid succession that you can't even place an outbound call from your phone. Like they're so aggressive and so like deeply manipulative that they scare you into this panic, and you get completely, out of your logical mind to the point where you can't sit there and critically analyze the situation because you're just making all emotionally rooted decisions at that point. And it's completely scary how they are able to just manipulate you in a way that you have no control over. Like, better, you know what's happening, but you are just completely unable to break out of the cycle of making these like emotional decisions.
And the scary thing about this is you mentioned earlier before that you don't try certain things because they're unethical and, the clients may see it as such. Bad thing about these attackers, they have no ethics. Ethics
Right.
are out the window.
Yep.
Safety of people is not out the window because you hear people on some of these things where they'll call someone up trying to extort money and they'll tell them that they've got their loved one held hostage. So they're pulling some really scary techniques that are nowhere near ethical. So ethics are out the window with these people.
Yeah, I think the fake kidnapping extortion scams really shocked me when I first started hearing about those a few years back. But the thing that I find to be the most scary right now is how aggressively some of these scamming groups are going after kids. And then what I've heard recently is not only are they extorting, essentially compromising images out of children and then threatening to release those images to like all of their friends at school, everyone at the school, everyone that they know, and then trying to extort money out of those kids to suppress the images once they're able to get them from the children. Now what they're doing is they're getting any image from the kid. So they'll pretend to be, romantically interested in the child, pose as someone not themselves, and a potential partner for that kid. Then they'll get any selfie from the child, and they're using AI to manufacture explicit images with that child's selfie. And then they're using that to then coerce the child into paying a ransom to suppress these AI manufactured explicit images. So the images aren't even real, and they're pushing these kids to the point where some of them are taking their own lives. And it is absolutely terrifying, especially for parents like myself of children who are about to go through their teens. And so I'm talking to my kids now, and my oldest is 13 and my youngest is 6, and I'm already talking to them about this. I don't think that we can really wait to talk to them about this because they are going after kids on Instagram who are, preteen or younger, and just any selfie will do. And they can pop it into AI and make terrible things and then threaten these kids. And these kids think their lives are over, and they're too young developmentally to understand that they can, live through this experience and come out on the other side okay.
Yeah, that's really scary stuff. I mean, as if the bullying and stuff that was going
Right.
on online was bad enough, this is even worse. And so we have a lot of the listeners that are wanting to pivot from other areas of security to try to break into cybersecurity. And a lot of the time I hear people wanting to figure out how to get into social engineering, and a lot of people want to get into physical pen testing. What's your advice for someone that wants to pursue that type of career?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would look at social engineering as a skill that you can develop in addition to the pen testing and red teaming skills to make yourself a more valuable player on a red team. You definitely want to go after the pen testing and more defensive focused roles when you're starting out in your career so that you can build a wealth of experience and a wealth of skills on both sides, both the defending side and the offensive security testing side. So don't worry if the first several jobs that you are able to get in the security space aren't exactly what you hoped that you would be doing, because any experience that you can get on the security side and the information security side, those roles are going to give you valuable experience that will help make you a better offensive security testing person later on down the road. And then you can kind of use that experience once you get the first role and you've got a few years under your belt to start to pivot into the types of offensive security testing that you really want to do and look for those opportunities in the offensive security testing organizations that you want to work at. And then networking with people at security conferences, at your local DEF CON group meetups, at local B-Sides conferences, things like that. Start meeting people who are in the industry and then, fostering relationships with those individuals that can help open the door to new opportunities and new jobs. And then working on your social engineering skills in addition to your hard technical testing skills will help you create a resume that is really robust and really compelling when those red team opportunities come up. And ideally, you're going to want to have, 5 years plus of experience, plus a really wide variety of skills to be an appealing candidate to red team hiring managers and practice directors. And if you want a great example of what that looks like, currently we have a red team role open at Bishop Fox for a senior red team consultant. And that job description is something that you can look at and then sort of map your skills to that job description, figure out where your gaps are, and then kind of figure out and map what skills you need to develop over the next few years to then close that gap and make yourself a really well-rounded senior red teamer.
Great advice. I like that. And one of the things too is when people learn about these roles, they're too quick to want to jump in and don't think about that. I like the way you're taking a more kind of longer term goals in effect, because, for those listening, if you haven't worked in cybersecurity yet, these are not always the easiest roles in the world. And as you gain these skills, the easier it is to get those types of roles. Because as for myself, I spent 6 years as sysadmin, was in security for about 8 years before I got my first pen testing role. So, it would have been, I couldn't imagine trying to jump in where I was at before I did that sysadmin job and try to do something in offensive security.
Yeah, typically speaking, like social engineering alone is not a job. So, for example, myself, I built Bishop Fox's tabletop facilitation service line from the ground up. And I did that after working as a consultant for nearly a decade and doing assessments for companies, security assessments for analyzing the gaps in their security programs to a variety of different frameworks for a very long time, and just having familiarized myself with more of the GRC side of things and then performing more defensive type duties and services with another security consulting firm, I was able to then bring that knowledge into Bishop Fox and create that service line. So I don't exclusively do the red teaming social engineering side of things. And so having, other skills that you can bring to the table and other talents is a great way that you can then get to use the social engineering skills. But I also had the misconception that I would be able to find a job as a social engineer. And truly, that opportunity just really doesn't exist in most organizations to specialize that deeply.
And here you mentioned GRC. I think this is one missed opportunity people don't think about. But because if you have that GRC background and you're working in offensive security, you're going to be able to work better with the auditors. You're going to be able to have a better understanding of what takes place in these compliance type assessments, that you're going to be a better offensive security professional. So in my opinion, don't downplay these opportunities to work in GRC or working on one of the IT audit teams.
Yeah. And I think just for those listeners who aren't familiar with the acronym, it's governance, risk, and compliance. And there are many roles that are focused on those activities, especially at large corporations who have very broad security programs that need continuous development, policy nurturing, and audit and compliance activities throughout the year. So there are some really tremendous opportunities for people who are inclined on that side of the house. And offensive security testing, especially on the consulting side of things, if you're working for a firm that is strictly a consulting company, that can be something that is a grind, and it can be extremely exhausting and a lot of people suffer from burnout on the consulting side. So I think while there is this tendency to want to make the red teaming and the offensive security testing look like the most exciting side of security, I think that there are so many opportunities on the defensive side and then embedded at one company working towards, the goals and objectives of enhancing the security program for one firm that can be so very rewarding, especially when you have a team that you're working with together on one objective and set of goals and objectives that you can focus on and then strive to improve over time. Rather than working as a consultant, you're basically dropping in to a new company every 4 to 6 weeks, and you get dropped in, have to learn everything you can, do the job, write the report, and then you get, the fortnight storm eat you up, and then you have to get ripped out, and then you parachute into the next one the next week. So it can be a little crazy. And it just kind of depends on what kind of person you are as to what role will really fit well with the style of work that you're looking for.
Yeah,
But
that's interesting.
I do know a bunch of blue team focused people that live for crushing red teamers and red team tiers. So there is definitely some rewarding opportunities to be found on the defensive side.
Yeah, just a couple comments towards your point is for anyone that's wanting to start out in this, consulting may not always be the best option because you mentioned, it could be a lot of work. I know there's some of the big four consulting companies, I hear people being double and triple booked. So a lot of times people take advantage of a young college graduate and just put them through the fire and they're overworked and burn out. But if you go to work like internally, because I started out as a consultant in offensive security, but then I got the opportunity to work for a bank. And whereas during a consulting role, a pen test I had a week to do, we had like a month within the bank. We had more time to do that testing. Some of the things to keep in mind for people when you're trying to break in or just getting started out.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. You have more time, you have a better feel of the scope and the rules of engagement, and you usually have a lot more support from the internal team to make the goals and everything align with what your overall objectives are too. It's not just some compliance checkbox, we got to get this pen test done or have this red team accomplished before the end of the year or something like that.
And also back to your point, there's some blue team people that love what they're doing. I mean, there's threat hunting, instant response, there's a lot malware analysis. There's a lot of really cool stuff out there. There's other areas. And I really think it's good to look at different types of roles.
I think also I got some really great advice from a more seasoned blue team person, and that was you should really flip back and forth so that you can be a better defender, do a job that's on the offensive side for a while. And so you can be a better, red teamer, do a job that's on the defensive side for a while and just get a feel for what you're up against, basically.
Yeah, that's great advice. I had Joe Vest on recently, and that's one of the things he kind of recommends, and he's doing more of a defender type role now. But the knowledge you learn from the offensive side, because I started out on the defensive side, moved into the offensive side, but you figure working on the offensive side for a while, the better you're going to be at, locking things down because you know what these type of attacks look like. And even if you're not specializing in offensive security, it's good to have that knowledge because having the knowledge of both are going to make you a more well-rounded security person. So we're getting down towards the end of the episode. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you're getting ready for Hacker Summer Camp next week, and I look forward to seeing you there. Do you have any closing comments?
Yeah, I would encourage anyone that's going to Hacker Summer Camp, whether it's this year or in the future, check into the DEF CON groups community. We will have our LAN party there for anybody who wants to play games with us. We're also going to have just the room open from 10 to 6 every day if you want to hang out with us. We'll have some swag and some fun conversations, and we'll have a few special guests checking in with us as well. So we'd love to host you. We'll be on level 2 this year in room 237. So come by and say hi.
Well, thanks again. I appreciate you joining. It's great catching up with you, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks, everyone, for joining. If you enjoy the podcast, please share with your friends and subscribe.
Thank you for listening to The Phillip Wiley Show. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. In the meantime, to learn more about Phillip, go to thehackermaker.com and connect with him on LinkedIn and Twitter @Phillip Wiley. Until next time.